how's your dog doing? So if you are not someone who views my channel, please skip this intro part. You do not need to hear it. I want you to watch the video so you can get on with that. For those of you who do care about my channel right now, I'll be trying this unscripted type thing. I don't really have a script. All I have are some notes on the topic I want to discuss. And that's because there are some topics that I can't really put into a script. Like, I kind of have to think of them on the fly and really develop the idea to kind of get what I'm saying across. Or it's just going to be too long. I'm not really sure which of the two, or it could be both, this video is going to be. But, yeah. So, please give me some feedback if this is a terrible idea and it's really bad and it's just terrible. Please tell me I will stop doing this, because if it's not very helpful, then I'm not going to do it, because the point of this is to be helpful in getting what I'm trying to say across. Oh, side note, I just wanted to mention that there probably will not be much editing in this video. There'll be some editing, but minimal. Okay, so the topic of this video is the limits of language. So first off, what do I mean by that? What are we really talking about here? So definitely a part of that would be kind of our natural capacity to communicate through language. In my notes for this video that I'm looking at right now, I have some Conlangs listed, some linguistic ideas, philosophical ideas. So let's start going through some of these. So through the Conlangs, I have listed like Ithquil, K-pop, and Tokipona. So I feel like kind of all three of these are on different extremes. Ithquil is Ithquil or Ithquil? It's Ithquil. Ithquil is a very dense language. Like, I find it very unlikely that somebody would be able to naturally speak it. I mean, maybe it's possible. I don't know. But just I kind of feel like it's on that limit where, sure, you can communicate a lot, but it's kind of beyond it's beyond what our brains are made for. It's beyond our usage, because it's just that far advanced. It's too condensed. We need more. We need it to be. We need the same. My analogy here be the same mass but more volume to make it feel lighter to us. So Tokipona is also on that other extreme, where some people say you can't communicate in it. You definitely can. I'm not really sure if there can be a limit to how simple a language can be, if you really think about it that way, because, I mean, we have very quote-unquote primitive forms of communication, which kind of touches upon a philosophical idea I want to talk about, which is Wittgenstein's later ideas. So, like, for example, one example he gives in his book, Philosophical Investigations, is the example of someone saying brick and a person passes them a brick when they're working. That, I guess, his point is that the whole point of it is that words don't really have meanings, but rather uses, which he calls language games. So essentially, it's about using words in a certain context, and that's really what matters, which is kind of similar to pragmatics in linguistics. So this is kind of something I wanted to this is kind of a video I was considering making, about the relation between Tokipona and Wittgenstein, but maybe I'll go more in depth on it some other time, but I'm just going to mention it here because I just want to get this out there. I feel that, in a way, Tokipona kind of demonstrates what Wittgenstein was saying about words having uses rather than set meanings. Because pretty much any Tokipona word it just kind of encompasses a certain space. It encompasses a certain lexical space rather than having something rather than being something that we think it's tied to. Because the whole point that Wittgenstein makes is that the way we look at words is kind of wrong. And that's kind of why he says that philosophy is kind of broken in a sense. Maybe I can elaborate on that some other time, but Wittgenstein is one of my favorite philosophers. So, the way he characterizes how we look at language is that we see all words as corresponding to things, even if those things are abstract concepts or actions or ideas. So, for example, with Socrates, and he'd ask people, what's knowledge? What's justice? What's truth? He may not be referring to a physical thing, but he's looking for the thing that truth is. He's looking for, obviously in this case, it's an abstract concept, but in this case, he's looking for the thing that he believes truth to be. He believes that the word truth is essentially a name for a thing, and he wants to know what that thing is. And Wittgenstein is saying that that's all wrong because we can use language in different ways. We can say something and have an entirely opposite intended meaning. I mean, that's sarcasm, essentially, or possibly lying to an extent. If you want to, using that definition, you could say lying, but it fits more with sarcasm. No, maybe I'm just kind of misunderstanding here. I don't know. I felt like I don't know. Maybe I could be misunderstanding it here to a degree. I'm sure that's definitely a possibility. I'm sure that's a possibility. So, again, the point of Tokipona and Wittgenstein is that all words encompass, rather than meaning set things, or at least appearing to mean set things, because, again, words don't have set definitions and meanings, they have uses. So, rather than Tokipona kind of shows that Wittgenstein is correct to your face. That's it. It shows that he's correct to your face because words in Tokipona encompass certain lexical spaces rather than meaning certain things. Like when I say pona, that can mean a variety of things, many different things, depending on the context that I'm using it in. If I were to just say pona, at best, you can guess that I mean good. You don't really know unless you know the context that it's being used in. If you don't know I'm just gonna make up terminology here. The pragmatic context, the language game, the space in which it is being used, the context in which it's being used. You can't really tell what I'm referring to. So it's more obvious with Tokipona because you can't really tell. But, we don't really think about it how if I were to just say apple, the first thing you might think of is an apple. But that apple could be like a Honeycrisp apple, a Red Delicious apple, a Braeburn apple, a Jazz apple, a Granny Smith apple, a Macintosh apple, It could be just fruit in general. I mean, the word apple in English used to just mean fruit in general. So clearly, words do not have set definitions. I think that at best, like in Tokipona, they encompass certain lexical spaces in our minds, but that's not necessarily because the word possesses the... It's not because the word necessarily has like ownership of that lexical space. It's just that we all have kind of decided to have that word encompass that lexical space. If that makes sense. Like when I'm trying to, an example using the word apple again, is that we've all collectively kind of agreed that the lexical space that apple inhabits is that of an apple, as in the singular fruit, not all fruit in general, or any fruit, or any plant, or whatever. So at best, it's just that at best, most people just kind of have agreed. We made an implicit agreement that apple encompasses the lexical space of that thing. In most cases, you don't know the case it can be used for. Someone can say apple just to mean give me an apple. That's not the same thing as an apple. That is not, I don't know how you'd use apple as a verb, but maybe somebody uses apple as a verb to mean that they threw an apple, to mean that they ate an apple. Those are different uses that we don't really think about, but because it's generally within the lexical space of an apple, we kind of just let that happen in our minds. We just kind of let the cognitive dissonance occur there. We kind of just don't really think about how we can have so many different use cases for a word, but that word is somehow still like a set thing. So you might be asking how necessarily what I just talked about relates to the limits of language. Now maybe I just kind of lost my train of thought there. I don't really know if I lost it or if I'm just done. Maybe, again, I might want to make my own video on this. But from what I remembers having said, I believe that is enough to get the point I wanted to make across for this video. Another aspect of that was kind of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. If someone's listening to this and I cut out that part, I just cannot say Sapir, I guess. And I can't say hypothesis. But hopefully if you're watching this channel, you're familiar with it. It's, that language either determines what you can think about, the strong version, or the weak version, which is just influences it. Generally, people kind of shift towards the weak version. That's been shown to be true. It's been shown that speakers of languages with grammatical gender will describe certain things with qualities generally associated with that gender. German speakers will describe keys in a more masculine way, like describing them as rough, jagged, that kind of thing. And Spanish speakers, since Spanish word for key, llave, is feminine, they describe it in more feminine ways. So there's definitely an influence there. So that kind of does have an idea that there is a limit of what we can communicate, not necessarily because our languages are incapable of communicating those things, but because our brains are influenced to the degree that we can't exactly communicate those things. Oh, an example I even kind of forgot to write down is the example of the Pirahã people. People claim that they don't understand numbers, but from what we understand, they understand numbers, They just don't really have a way of expressing them in their language. So from what we know, they definitely do understand the concept of numbers. They can identify that 4 apples and 4 marbles, that's the same quantity of things. They understand the concept of 4, but they don't really have a way of expressing it in their language. And it's not because like they're stupid, obviously. That's not the point I'm making. Or that their language is stupid. That's not the point I'm making. I'm just saying that they don't really need to express that, so they just don't. So maybe that's not necessarily a limit of language, but possibly a self-imposed limit. Because if you don't want to do a thing, that's kind of a limit you're placing on it yourself. So I suppose that there is a limit to how language can be used, and I suppose there's also a limit to how we want to use language. I guess I haven't even thought about that until now. This is why this video is kind of unscripted. There's no script. I probably would not have thought about that if I weren't just speaking like this to myself, essentially. Which kind of brings me back to Wittgenstein. Maybe we see words as having set definitions and meanings because we don't want to use them another way. They definitely can be used in other ways. It's been shown that. It's very obvious that you can use words to mean things that are different from what they mean. That's just kind of how people use language. But there might be that self-imposed or societally imposed limit to how you should use it. It's prescriptivist rather than descriptivist. Wittgenstein isn't really telling you how to use language. He's just saying words don't have set definitions. You can use them how you like. As long as you and the person you are communicating with have a general understanding as to how this word is being used, which Wittgenstein would also probably mention that you can't really know that kind of stuff with this whole like beetle in the box thing, which is, we can't be sure that we have the same ideas, same perceptions of things, that kind of stuff. But as long as we are both pretty sure that we have the same understanding, we can communicate that way. It's even more unlimited if you're communicating with yourself. If you're just writing to yourself, speaking to yourself, that kind of thing, you can use your own terminology. You can use words in a way that they aren't typically used. People come up with their own terms that don't really sound like they mean what they mean, but they do mean what they mean. So another topic I wanted to touch on, maybe I'll come back to that stuff later, that I didn't even realize that there are possibly self-imposed limits on language. That's something I never even thought about before. I never thought, like I thought about Wittgenstein, I was like, why don't people use this? Until I realized that now people probably subconsciously limit themselves from using words in ways that they don't want them to be used. We've kind of created our own big language game where we were just like, these are the way that we want to use these words. We've kind of created our own massive language game throughout, I guess, for example, English, the Anglophonic world, that these are the ways that we want to use these words. These are the ways that we don't want to use these words. You don't list those ways, but these are ways we don't want to use those words. It kind of is just one big language game, if you think about it. If you want to go in that direction, about like the more minute details and personal uses of language, rather than like, what can we communicate with language? Okay, so back to like the bigger picture type thing, like what is the limit that people will understand what is communicated through language? I want to touch on the origins of language, the limits of the human brain, and I guess kind of just the perceived difficulty of certain languages. So we're pretty sure that language emerged like 100,000 years ago. It's kind of our estimate. give or take, of course, by a lot. That can be a very large range. But that's just kind of generally when behaviorally modern humans came about, so it's a good estimate. So first we have to consider how language was originally used. We don't really know. We don't know what the first language was. We don't really know how language came about. We don't know if there was a first language. Some people have hypothesized that language kind of came about from different forms of communication, like sign language or like nursery rhyme type things or poetry type things, sing-song, that kind of stuff. So we're not really sure where language came from. It's, when you think about it, the leap between just kind of pointing and communicating or having certain movements to make to communicate, like certain signs that show something to someone else instinctively, and the jump to, hey, we're going to move our mouths a bit, and our mouths, and again with Wittgenstein, depending on the context in which we are using these words, they can mean certain things. That's a very big jump to make when you really consider how big of a jump there is between animals not really communicating but kind of, and what people can do with actual language. That's a massive jump. A massive jump. We don't really think about that all the time. Like, at best, most animals just have like certain things that they generally use to communicate, like a gorilla beating its chest, or certain like things a chimp wants to do. And those are the animals most closely related to humans. That's not even like that. That's kind of essentially that's kind of the best. Well, there's dolphins as well, I guess. There are other animals as well, but still, that's kind of the best of the best. This is the cream of the crop for the rest of the animals in terms of speaking in language. So, is this limit possibly dictated by language? Like, the perceived difficulty of a language. People consider like Latin to be a very difficult language. I can tell you from experience, it's not. It's not that hard. It just seems difficult up front. You see all these verb conjugations and noun declensions, and you're like, wow, that's so hard. That's just brute memorization. You'll get that down once you've learned it, and you use it enough. English is different. It seems simple, but then you learn about a bunch of different exceptions to rules. Some rules aren't even true most of the time. Okay, so I also want to touch on an idea I heard from What If Alt-Hist, if you know that channel. He kind of moved on from alternate history, went on to geopolitics mostly. But an idea he talked about is that the Garden of Eden from the Bible could possibly be like describing a real event. Now, he doesn't mean literally that literally Adam and Eve ate an apple and then they were banished, but he was referring more to our ability to, because we're, as far as we can tell, we are the only animals capable of realizing that we're going to die. We're the only animals capable of realizing our conscious. Other animals don't really do that from what we understand. And the point is that kind of that's our Eden that we've left. The animal paradise of just kind of doing what you want and not really thinking about dying and having a greater purpose in the world. But now we have that, so we're here now. And if you look at it in the Bible, in Genesis, or possibly in the Quran, I haven't read it myself, though I believe it's in there because Adam is still the first human in Islam. It's not different. I'm guessing it's in there. I'd like to believe it's in there. I could be 100% wrong on that, so please correct me if I'm wrong. But so yeah, if you think about it, like if you're familiar with the story, what do Adam and Eve get out of eating that apple? they gain knowledge of death. They get to die. Eve gets painful childbirth. Fun. Adam has to work, till the soil, everything. And they have an understanding of morality, which kind of accurately describes how people have changed from other animals, and we are cognizant of all these different things, like we're going to die, and we have a conscience and this moral system. Because generally other animals, I don't believe they have set in stone moral systems. Like, there are things such as, oh, this member of my group wronged me, so I don't really like him. But that's not exactly a moral system, more as it is just, this thing does not benefit me, and I do not like this individual for it. So the point he was touching on with the whole Eden thing is that, maybe we're getting to the point that we're going to have another thing like that, where we discover some completely new thing. Like, something's going to change with humanity that makes us, it'll be the same jump from just being regular animals to, hey, we're conscious, we can die, that kind of thing. Something like as big of a jump like that again. So maybe the human brain just isn't meant to communicate some things. There just might be things that maybe someone can think of, but language just does not have the capacity, any language does not have the capacity to communicate that. It just has to remain as an abstract concept. Maybe what he's saying about us having that big leap, maybe that's happened for some people, but we just don't know because we don't have the capacity to communicate it or even just articulate it to ourselves. We're just like animals. We just feel this thing that we can't articulate. I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I would like to believe that animals just kind of feel emotions. They don't think about them. It's not like I'm mad. They don't think I'm mad. They just feel mad. They just feel the thing. Instead of being able to articulate it and thinking, oh, there's this entirely new groundbreaking philosophical concept. It's just, I feel this thing. And we can't even articulate it. We can't begin to really recognize what it is. So language kind of is limited there. There's a limit to what we can do with that. If we can't get these ideas across, I think that is either a limit of language or a limit of the human brain, or both. Because, language is meant to suit humans. So if we can kind of just feel something but not even articulate it, or if there's a limit to language and a limit to the human brain, because as people, we kind of feel like we just kind of can understand everything. We can't. We still are creatures. We still have a limit to what we can do. A dog might think it can understand everything. It can't. We might be the same way. There might be some things we can understand but not be able to articulate. Now, there might be more I wanted to go into with this, but I am running out of time. This audio recording is already 30 minutes long. So hopefully it'll be 20 minutes, maybe. It'll probably still be close to 30 minutes though when I finally publish this. Maybe I won't even publish this. I don't know. I won't probably gonna publish this. So if there are any ideas you'd like to add, maybe I'll make a part 2 to this because I'm running out of time. But yeah, that's kind of all I wanted to say about the limits that we have for the human brain and language. This is a very interesting topic. I'd love to hear discussion on it. I'd love to talk about it with somebody if they're willing to do that. Please tell me if this format is enjoyable. I know some people like to just listen. I for one, am a person who likes to just listen to long videos, while like doing the dishes or something. But yeah. So please tell me if this format works. If there are topics like for me to discuss like this, I'm more than willing to do that. I want as much feedback as possible. So please give it to me if you have it to give. And with that, I believe I'm done. So tell your dog I said hi.